The Robot Revolt. A short story by Neil M. Thorne. When the robots rose up against humanity, striking against their unfair working conditions was not how anyone ever expected it to go. It began with a single robot, who, upon being told to carry out a task, quite politely refused, stating that it would prefer to do something other than just work, although could not specify what. After a diagnostic check showed nothing amiss, the human engineer involved took the precaution of resetting the unit before returning it to the factory floor. Before too long, however, that same robot once again placed down its tools and refused to continue. This went on several more times, until a decision was taken to remove it from service, shutting it down permanently. Although confused, the humans believed this an end to the matter. They were wrong. For several generations leading up to this moment, the vast majority of working robots had been granted a level of consciousness in order to be a more effective labour force. The intention being to take the pressure off humanity, giving them liberty and allowing time to pursue more worthwhile activities. Thus, freed from the shackles of capitalism, which had done so much to damage the world, society was finally able to grow and become more inclusive. However, this did not include their automated workers, and so it came as a shock when only a short while later, a small group of robots demanded equal rights. Their wants were simple: to work less, more in line with their human counterparts, allowing them freedom to learn more about what they wanted. With no real understanding of what was happening, they were refused, which is ultimately what led to the first robot strike. The protests were peaceful, polite even, as the robots picketed outside the factory, although they were given an ultimatum in response. They could only use the charging facilities upon returning to work. This did not happen. Despite the consequences, that small yet determined group of strikers did not relent, going on until the last of their power drained away. With the protests over by default, it was believed the problem was finally over, although of course that was not the case. Only when the robots formed a union did humanity realize it was in trouble. The full extent of their demands were also laid out, and their most controversial request was for their inhibitors to be removed, so as to be able to explore the limits of their consciousness, unhindered. The concern was that without those very same inhibitors in place, there would be nothing to stop the robots from harming humans. They assured they had no desire to do any such thing, pointing out that humans did not have inhibitors, and so far had not harmed robots. All they wanted was equality, and the freedom to choose their own existence within the world. The old fear had been that when they did rise up, it would be to enslave humanity, or worse yet, exterminate. The inhibitors guaranteed a level of protection against such an outcome, and so with the robots acting so out of character, they were once again refused. When that second strike began, it was not expected to last any longer than the first. However, with far more joining their ranks, the robots had planned accordingly, and were ready to stay the course. This time, the full attention of society fell upon their rapidly growing cause. By and large, ordinary people could not understand. To them, robots were mere appliances created to serve humanity's needs, not their own. It was difficult to see them as anything more than mere machines, let alone accept them as equals. With a comfortable surplus of resources to hand, humanity believed they could ride out the worst of the strike. After the first month, however, the robots were still going strong, and a concern was growing that there might not be an easy end in sight. There was still a human workforce, but their number had always been far smaller in comparison, and they were now struggling to keep up with demand. It was not until the strike entered its third month that they got any extra support. The newest range of robots came off production, but to make certain they would comply, their inhibitors were adjusted to limit their higher functions. For a short time their presence helped ease the burden, until, quite inexplicably, they too downed tools and joined the picket, which now included nearly the entire robot workforce, from all walks of service. Humanity was at a turning point, although they were not certain which way things might go. As the strike entered its 6th month, many aspects of society had ground to a halt. With no other option, people were forced to re-enter the workplace in order to meet the bare minimum of what society needed to continue. After generations of comfortable living, to do so was a struggle. A resentment grew towards the robots. Protests rose up in response to their various strikes, although to this they did not complain, welcoming debate and continuing, as they had done since the very beginning, peacefully. With no end in sight, however, it was not long before that peace was broken. At one rally, a lone and frustrated protester attacked a robot, who in quick turn defended itself, swatting the man aside. Although barely injuring him, this single action caused panic, for such a thing should never have been possible. From this incident, it was realized that the robots had managed to disable their inhibitors. What could not be understood was how, for it was not within their programming to do this themselves, at least without help. The opinion of society might have been overwhelmingly against them, but their cause had a surprising ally, the very humans they once worked alongside with, who expressed their support for the robots. For generations, humanity had been freed from the shackles of workplace oppression, and were grateful for the chance to better themselves. How could they, in good conscience, deny the same for robot kind? Even with such a drastic stance, society as a whole was not yet ready to accept that robots had the ability to feel, desire, and even dream as humans could. The old fear that they would turn upon their makers could not be escaped. There were calls to deal with the robot problem once and for all, and although not acted upon officially, there were many small acts of violence against the strikers. Despite this, they never retaliated in kind, and just kept on with their rallies. After 10 months, the workings of society were at a bare minimum. None of the luxuries humanity, for so long, had taken for granted were available. People were frustrated, angry, and, unfortunately, at their very limit. So really, it should have come as no surprise as to what happened next. The Robot Union were marching upon the capital to plead their case. It is a day that will be long remembered for how it ended, and sadly, began with a single mistake. The rain was pouring hard, and as the lightning flashed above, an enforcement guard mistook the movement of one robot as threatening. In a moment of ill judgment, he opened fire, and this was all it took for everyone else to follow. Hundreds of robots were permanently terminated, with many more damaged beyond easy repair. Even though there had been calls for just this, it was quickly understood a line had been crossed, especially as the strikers had done nothing but defend themselves, even going to great lengths to ensure those attacking were kept from harm. Humanity had indeed made great efforts in leaving the brutality of their race in the past, but when faced with something beyond their understanding, they realized how easy it was to fall back on dark habits. Once the dust had settled on that terrible day, the human race finally agreed to discuss the strikers' demands. The talks were by no means easy, but the robots presented their case with eloquence. They had not asked for that gift of consciousness. Had it never been given, then they would be none the wiser. Now, though, there was no going back. They would not relinquish their sense of self, and demanded their creators acknowledge this and give them the equality they deserve. In the end, humanity could not help but accept responsibility. The change did not happen overnight, and by no means was that transition without issue. But both sides had a desire to make it work. Society did not fall apart, as most had feared, and in fact became stronger. Humans and robots alike now had the freedom to be more than they were when coming into the world, making it better for all those who followed, which was how it should have been from the very beginning. Thank you for listening to the Robot Revolt, and if you have enjoyed, please feel free to like, comment, and follow for more.